Hey, you are now listening to the Graceway Podcast. Let's talk.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to this podcast, Let's Talk. My name is Jeff Adams. I'm here with Pastor Tim Dunn, and this is what we do every week. We just sit around and we talk about whatever it is that you have just spoken about.
Right.
And today, Pastor Tim, was episode number 2 about Solomon.
Right.
Last time it was Solomon as a young man. This time Solomon as an old man. And this happens to fall. You and I are talking here in the middle of May 2022.
Right.
And that is the month that is filled with graduation activities and all of that. I thought it was a very appropriate time to deal with what you dealt with. Yeah. And so graduates now, whether it's a graduate from high school or college or grad school, typically this is a time in life where people are grappling with the big questions of life.
Yeah.
Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I headed? What's life about? Why is there air? All of those great questions of life. So taking into account everything that you shared with us today, what would be your one piece of take-home advice for graduates in light of Solomon?
Yeah. Find somebody older than you that you can ask your questions to. I kind of picture him as this kind of premium mentor, mass blast radius. But he has this very distinct, unique, odd story. Been on, feels like every side of every issue.
Right.
And I think he's trying to, get his story out there to be as helpful as possible. That's how I think there's more to it than that. But whether it be experience isn't free. You don't have to have experiences to understand, whether it be just his general intent of telling his story for instruction, whether it be, there's lots of pieces in that. And to be honest with you, you know about me, probably the space that I spend the most amount of time in Scripture is in wisdom literature and Psalms, personally. And the reason for that is because I had a mentor who built that into me. And so even though I grew up in a single-parent home, even though there were gaps in development in the house for me, one of the reasons that I love the church is because the church really provided me father figures and mentors and coaches. And I really cannot imagine my life absent those. I am quite certain I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you in the absence of those. And that's everything from where's I going to go to college to should I buy a motorcycle. I mean, it was all, which was a no, by the way. Do not buy a motorcycle. To should I go to work here, to that didn't go well. I've had seasons where I was low on mentors, and those were, in hindsight, the most difficult years. And I've had seasons where I was rich in mentors. I'm in a unique season now because the role you had and the role I have is like the de facto mentor. It's harder to find mentors when that presumption is there. But if I were, and I do this with my kids, I will continue to do it with anyone that I coach. Find mentors that are a click or two, ideally, and then one who's doing what you want to do. So it's one or two, and ask them the questions you're afraid to ask.
Right. I think that's great advice, and I love the fact that you focused on the book of Ecclesiastes today and described to us how Solomon, in Song of Solomon, his youngness is coming out. And then Proverbs takes you through his entire life cycle and Ecclesiastes. And you worded it like this. You said Ecclesiastes is important because these are the words of an old man being transparent.
Right.
And in light of what you just said, I think that it's important for young people to understand that just because someone is old doesn't make them a mentor.
That's true. That's true.
In fact, most of the old people are probably not good mentors. But so as an old man being transparent, what was so thrilling to me about you picking Ecclesiastes today, and I don't know that we've ever talked about this or not, but I came to faith when I was about 18 years of age. And I had been asking these big questions of life to the degree that when I started college, first 2 years in college, I thought that I wanted to major in philosophy.
Yeah, I did know that,
And when I came to faith, it was really the book of Ecclesiastes, believe it or not, more than any other book of the Bible, that turned my life upside down. And because of a little help from an old theologian, an old Presbyterian pastor from St. Louis who ended up in Europe by the name of Francis Schaeffer, he had written this little book called Escape from Reason.
Yeah.
It was not a commentary on Ecclesiastes, but it had a lot of Ecclesiastes in it.
Yeah.
And as a young philosophy student, I thought, man, in this little book, it seems like there is every philosophy known to man.
Absolutely.
And what you said just a minute ago, he took both sides of every position.
He did.
Yeah.
So maybe the first bit of advice is read the book of Ecclesiastes. And then I mean really it's
and probably a very modern translation.
Yeah, probably a very modern translation. But yeah, if you know, and I do this with my kids. I had instilled into me read a proverb a day. I do that. I've done it for years and years and years. I do the same with my kids, and I read Ecclesiastes very, very, very regularly. It is appropriately depressing, but if you are curious and open to kind of the philosophical slant of our faith, it's a dynamic book.
So what did you, I've asked you this question on multiple occasions, but what did you leave, if anything, on the cutting room floor as you prepared this message?
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically doing a survey on Solomon in 2 weeks, which meant that I left a lot. Yeah, I'm not even sure we have time to talk about what I left on the cutting room floor. As I'm going through this series, it's been interesting to try to say what are the can't miss topics. I have a year to go through the entire Bible, and I just gave Solomon 2 weeks. He's that significant of a guy, just like I gave David 2 weeks. You can't give him too much more, but similar to David, we talked about this last time, similar to David, a very complicated guy. And yet, brilliant at the ability to identify patterns in a helpful way, brilliant to simplify. I mean, the guy intellectually is pretty dynamic, and like I said today, simple wisdom for finishing well. It's 3 things, pretty comprehensive, I felt like. So yeah, I really could go on and on and on and on and on about him. I don't know that we have time, but I would encourage people, as simply but forcefully as I can, get your nose into Proverbs. Be reading that stuff. It will change your worldview very quickly.
Talk to us a little bit about your own personal routine, because that was one of the things I was thinking of. What advice do you have for grads? And I think sometimes kids who they're off like a rocket ship to go into life and to school. You've got a son who, before you blink twice, is going to be going off to college himself.
Yes.
And but yet this habit that was instilled in you by mentors of being in wisdom literature, what would that look like? Kids at that age are not going to sit down and want to read through Deuteronomy every year. But if they could get their nose into the wisdom books, what would be a good suggestion to do that?
Well, and I'll take us a little bit down a side path here. My boy Noah is his name, just turned 15.
Yeah.
And for his birthday, I got 5 men who had agreed to kind of coach him into manhood with me. One, I wanted to instill into him the humility of raising you is too big of a job just for me. I needed other people, and so his coach, his uncle, his godfather, his kind of teacher around stuff, and his pastor, who here is Pastor Brandon Smith, our student pastor. And I said to him, and I'm your dad, right? I'm not all those things to you. And so what I would say to a college student, what I would ask, really, really beg, is just you need, call them whatever you want, a coach, a mentor, a counselor, a whatever, who's speaking into your life on a regular basis. It's probably not a parent, although they should be speaking into your life on a regular basis. It's not a friend, although you should let good friends speak into your life on a regular basis. This is somebody who is removed enough from your story, meaning they're not your peer, and removed enough by proximity, meaning they're not blood related, that they have an objectivity. I would want that person to be somebody that you would want to be like. So you don't find a mentor that isn't in my case, I don't want to mentor that's a bad pastor, that's an awful dad, that's bad, like that you want to be scanning, and Proverbs talks about this, wisely observing the righteous and the wicked, and learning from both. And I had talked to you before about the reason I became a reader was because I had a mentor say, observe and do a study on the best leaders that you know. And I realized that they were all readers. So that, for example. So spend some time and, take, let's say, 30 to 60 days and just be more observant, be more sensitive to God's Spirit around somebody that could be. And at the same time, be reading God's Word, reading Proverbs, reading Ecclesiastes. It's a chapter a day. I make my kids listen to it when I take them to school. I take our executive pastors' sons to school, same thing, proverb a day. And so I'm filling my heart up with God's wisdom and God's Word. I have an external mentor who's speaking into, and the agreement is I'll be 100% honest with you. Can you be 100% honest with me? So, and then I also have a counselor. So I have coaches, counselors, friends. That's kind of the trifecta for me. And then in my reading, every day, I read multiple Psalms and a proverb, and then we have a Bible reading plan that does right now happen to be in the book of Psalms. But and then I have, this is going to sound obnoxious, it's true, but I have 6 books on my nightstand right now. You and I are reading through a book together, a large book together.
A very large book that sometimes holds the door open in a storm. Yeah.
I am factually, actually reading probably 3 books at a time. So I'm always thinking of input, right? And then I go to my counselor for process, and then my life, ideally, is the output. But I just think with college kids, you just need to get your head around. You can't get where you want to go by yourself, no matter what it is.
So if you're listening to us talk right now, if you would make a time mark and then rewind to about 5 minutes earlier, and you have enough practical advice to last a lifetime in what you just said, Pastor Tim.
And that's an interesting thing, and I'll take us down a different place. I have done that for so long.
Yeah.
I'm at this interesting spot where I've been talking to the staff about this. I think that I feel moderately depleted coming out of COVID, and I am looking for new routines because I'm in such an odd season with COVID. I need new routines. And I was talking to Pastor John, our executive pastor. I'm struggling with that because my routines have worked for me for so long that I'm needing some more input. But I know, and I'm not saying this arrogantly, you are like this. So I don't know that many people that are as intentional about inputs as I am. I have 3 counselors. We're both reading all the time. I have mentors. I have a pastor. I'm very, very, very intentional in that. And the reason that I am is the book of Proverbs. I am very, very, very nervous to be isolated, to try to have significance and influence and purpose and fulfillment, all the things that we want. Isolation and wrong relationships are death for that.
And I just heard you say something in this last little bit of several minutes that I think is very important, and it's to have more than one mentor, more than one voice in your life. We need a variety.
We do.
And when we talk about mentors, sometimes I see people get hung up on one mentor.
And
then what happens is you get only one perspective.
That's right. Yeah, most people are good at one or two things. And when you ask a mentor, number one, when you ask a mentor to be your only mentor, it's pretty overwhelming to that. Can you mentor me in everything for the rest of my life? So what I always say when I'm coaching people to find mentors is figure out what you want to be mentored in.
Yes.
Ask prospective mentor, could you mentor me in that thing for this amount of time? Once a month for 6 months. This is not a lifetime assignment. Because most often good mentors are in high demand. And if you want a good mentor, you need to bring vision and clarity so that they see that you're taking their time seriously.
And you and I have talked about that before. When somebody comes up and just asks the blanket question, would you be my mentor? The answer is always going to be no.
No.
But if somebody comes up with a little bit more specificity,
Yeah.
would you do this for
Yeah.
this amount of time? Here's what I'm thinking of.
The answer is almost always yes.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least we can quantify why it's
That's
no
right.
or maybe later.
That's right.
And that's just really good advice. You made another statement today that I made note of. And in fact, you kind of couched it by saying, if you get one thing to take away this morning, it's this. And Solomon's simple wisdom to finish well.
Yeah.
Do the right thing with repetition starting now.
Right.
Every word is measured there.
Yeah.
You want to talk into that a minute?
Yeah. Well, I'm obviously leading into Solomon's version of the right thing.
Right.
But I just know I know so many people, and I've been so many people. I did the right thing once or a couple of times, and I lose interest and I'm curious why I don't get the benefit. So it's the right thing with repetition. And then starting now, I know the right thing to do. I'll do it later. I know the right thing to do. I got other things to do. I think there are certain things, at least in Solomon's, fear God, make good friends, and have a vision for finishing. Today. Start right now.
Right, exactly.
And we always want a more finished product before we start. But all of the things in your life, like Microsoft wasn't Microsoft. It was a garage idea. Apple, the incredible basketball player that you idolize got handed a ball, and they just started. And our faith is very similar. The way you finish well is you start immediately, and you trust that God is going to provide you with the right things and the right people, but that you're going to have to keep doing those things over and over and over again. You might hit seasons, like I just said, where you need to add something or take something away, but there are certain kind of core tenets of growth in emotion and spirituality and those kind of things. You're just going to do them for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And so don't procrastinate. Start today, and don't wait until you understand it to do it.
Yeah, it's those constant reps.
It's those constant reps.
As a very well-known book recently published talks about, mastery is when you do something 10,000 hours, 10,000 times.
Absolutely.
And it just takes it going over and over and over.
And all these, Atomic Habits is another one, that just came out, and it's like,
it's the same thing.
This guy has literally monetized a biblical idea that's thousands of years old. And we're gobsmacked. Like, this is this is what Solomon's been talking about.
Yeah, it just expressed in a different word and a different culture. And but it's the same thing.
It's marketing. Yeah.
There is no new thing under the sun.
Yeah,
I guess is what Solomon would say,
that's
right?
a good point.
Yeah. So I was interested in one thing when you shared these three things that Solomon tells us to do: to fear God, find good friends, have a vision for your finish.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what we call here at Graceway growth track.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's
was that intentional?
Yeah.
Was one built upon the other?
No. I started. As we've talked, I've been having to do this, just taking an enormous amount of information. Solomon shows up in so many places, wrote at least almost 3 books, and so when I started, I had like 12. 12 things of Solomon. That's not simple. And, I ended up at 3. And so, obviously that language is native to this house. But it is pretty much.
You established that right when you first became the senior pastor, which and you and I both are committed to making disciples. And you and I both have emphasized for years, discipleship is not a book, it's not a program, it's not a video, it's not something that you go through and get a certificate and say it's a once and done. But it's a lifelong process. But what I love about the growth track approach, which is basically Solomon, is it's 4 simple things. Know and enjoy God, find friends, discover your purpose, and make a difference. And that is so simple, but it's almost like discipleship was a funnel. You very simply come in by doing those 4 things, repeat them over and over and over and over and over for the rest of your life.
That's right. That's right. And that's
discipleship.
That is discipleship. And as we have discussed, there are a handful of people who are not complimentary of that perspective. But for me, I am informed, as I said, by these guys, by Solomon, by this wisdom literature, and it's the only way I know how to do the right thing with repetition starting now. Here's our 4 values. It leads to 4 environments. We're going to do them forever. When are we going to do discipleship? That is discipleship. You're talking about the title. I'm talking about the work of.
Exactly.
And
when I came into ministry, it was a time when people were consumed with attending church.
Yeah, right.
And bring them in on buses, and then do this, and then do that, and you built this great machinery.
Yeah.
And so our thought at that time was, let's talk about what it really means to be a disciple.
Yeah.
So we start teaching, we start organizing some teaching material.
Right.
And all along I'm screaming, this is not discipleship. Yeah. It's not a program. It's not a book, although I wrote a book.
Yeah.
It's, it's not this, it's not that.
Yeah.
But I think that what Growth Track is coming back to center.
Trying.
And like, hey, you don't have to be able to name all of the dispensations or to say how many there are or aren't. Right. You don't have to know all the labels. Right. You just have to know God and enjoy Him, find friends, discover your purpose, and make a difference.
Yeah, that's it.
Now, do some reps.
Yeah. And it like anything else is not perfect, but I have, as you know, been obstinately stubborn at not. Okay, here's the book.
No,
the whole thing, the whole Christian faith is, I understand that there are areas that we need to resource and educate and train and all of those kind of things, but none of those things in and of themselves is comprehensively discipleship. It is not. It is the whole thing. It is the reps around it. It's the right thing with repetition. Start today. I'm adamantly insistent on that, and I think Solomon too. I mean, he's very, very nuanced and very philosophical, but at the end of the day, he's only saying a couple things, really. And just a fascinating guy. I'm brokenhearted, honestly, that I feel like I know him. I'm brokenhearted that he finished so poorly.
Yeah.
It scares me to death because it was all right there for him. I also, I benefit from you finishing well. I benefit from, so many people benefit when we finish well on the simple things. Mm-hmm. I benefit from you being here. Our church benefits from us both being here.
Right.
And we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
And we make it so complicated that nobody in their right mind could do it.
Yeah.
It really is just about God. I really want to do the right thing today, and if you give me tomorrow, great. And I want to do that for as many days as you give me in the place that you have me. And in the sovereignty and grace of God, He weaves this tapestry that, we couldn't have come up with.
Yeah. Go back to your illustration earlier. How did Michael Jordan become Michael Jordan? Well, thousands upon thousands of reps.
Yeah.
And you learn things. You learn new techniques. You get new information along the way.
Yeah.
But it's the reps.
It's the reps. It's the reps and the curiosity. I mean, that's
absolutely.
Another thing that I have. I always say to people about you, I mean, you're a PhD, you're a brilliant guy, like anything. You're one of the most curious leaders I've ever been around. You read like a maniac. And you're open-minded, I don't think I've ever said, do you want to read this book with me? And you'd be like, no. So you and I have read lots of books together and that kind of, and I love that even though you're quote unquote retired, even though you led this church for a lot of years faithfully and well, you're still learning.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I always say the day that I stopped learning is the day that I stopped being a disciple.
Yeah, that's exactly
because
right.
a disciple is a learner.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, great discussion, man. So where are we going next week before we sign off
I'm
today?
knocking some things around.
Okay, knocking some things around.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fair enough. All right. Well, thanks to all of you for joining us today on this podcast, Let's Talk. And I don't know how you got here. Some people find us on the Graceway website, Graceway social media, but you can find this podcast anywhere that you get your podcast, no matter what it is. And when you do find it, would you please subscribe, because we would like to take you along with us on this journey. And thanks for being with us, and we will see you at the same place, same time next week.
Thanks for tuning into the Graceway Experience. Hope we can talk again sometime.